Hello, welcome to the May 10th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm host of the livestream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in the live chat field or send them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer all questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with a number of questions. So if you don't see an immediate response to your questions, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, we will go through chronologically and answer all the questions in order. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're using, so whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, 11, 12, 13, etc., and which operating system, that information will be helpful. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. Several hours after the live stream ends, I'll take a quick dinner break and go back and rewatch the live stream and type up all the questions with timestamps so you could easily navigate. If you wanted to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, I think we're around 33,000 topics, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful website as a resource. We will also give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees, but they do serve as moderators in the live stream to help out with comments. And we'll give special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information. It's kind of an unofficial Steinberg resource, but still a wonderful set of reference materials for the Steinberg community. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work as the product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. With that, we will go ahead and start answering questions. Yazian Trebi asks, I heard you also work at ImageLine. I did by FL Studio, by Backshop. Would you ask them if I could get my reg key back from Fruity Loops Lifetime All Plugins Edition? Get back. So I don't have any affiliation with FL Studio or ImageLine. So I work for Yamaha, which is the owner of Steinberg. So. All right, and we had a question that was in Spanish that I translated really quickly. It says, I lost Cubase 12, all the plugins and waves, and I don't know how to get them back. So make sure that when you go to like your activation manager, so if you need to reinstall, you could go to the Steinberg Download Assistant. And if your computer is configured already, you could just go to the Steinberg Download Assistant and re-download and then reinstall Cubase 12. So we'll show that. All right, and there's also the Steinberg Activation Manager, so you can see which particular license that you have activated currently. So you could, just to make sure that you could activate it right there. And once we come over, good, reopen my Cubase 13. And then once you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, at that point you could just make sure that as we have the Download Assistant, and you could download the program directly from the Steinberg Download Assistant as well. All right, just get this project loaded up. Didn't like having all three open at once. Okay, next question is good. Read through. Okay, so we have from the Heartbreak Time Machine, or you see from Lonely Warrior, just says Cubase or Reaper. So Cubase is what you want to be running. So I think it's by far the most feature-packed DAW on the market. And maybe you could go onto an official Reaper live stream and ask the same question, if they have one. All right, we have a question from the Heartbreak Time Machine. It says, how do I save an existing project to a new project folder complete with audio files? With this move or copy the media? Thank you. So the easiest way to do this is just to choose, when you go to your file menu, just choose backup project. And once you do this, it's going to prompt you for a new folder. So we're going to define a brand new, never used before folder, kind of a virgin folder, if you will. All right, then we're gonna say this is the folder that we want. At this point, we could give it a particular name to the project. We could choose to minimize. We have different functions to minimize audio files. We can make all direct offline processing permanent, remove unused files. We don't have to back up video file or the Mixdown folder. So you have options for that. And what this will do is it's not going to copy, but it's going to move all of the contents needed for this particular project into the folder that we just defined. So once again, to start that process, go to your file menu and choose backup project. Wonderful to see Uno Memento from Finland on. Wishing your mom a happy early birthday. I think it's tomorrow, turning 100. I believe you mentioned. Everyone at Club Cubase wishes her a happy birthday. All right, and we have Daniela Tokan from Germany. Razel checking in from Denmark. We have Benny from Sweden. We have Tony Trunzo from Australia. Thanks for joining us in the middle of the night there. All right, so we see Danielle Tokan is still in Ukraine, going back for the weekend to Romania. I hope you're safe. All right, we have a question from Patrick. Hi, Greg. I have a question. In the media bay, I'm able to assign ratings to multiple files at once by selecting multiple files. I can't do the same for the tempo metadata. Okay, so let's take a look at Media Bay here. Okay, so let's say if I want to select these particular files, so I have these selected, then let's type in our value here. So it looks like once we have the files selected here, that you would just enter in, you could double click in the tempo value here in Media Bay, and then you could add multiple files directly to multiple, you could add the tempo value to multiple files at once. Also, if you wanted to do this in the pool window, you go to your media menu to open pool, or control plus the letter P, control command. You could select all of your files here and enter in the tempo for the selected files, and that will apply them to all of the different tracks. So once we go to your media bay, select the number of files, and then on the right hand side here, enter in, double click, enter in, and then you can see those values just entered for multiple files at once. So let me know if that helps, Patrick. Wonderful to see Jan from Cubase Index from Stockholm. Thanks for joining today, being such a loyal attendee. Appreciate having you on. We see Peter Bata from Montreal. All right, we have a question from Ecstasy Tunes. Hi, Greg. Why middle C in Cubase is C3 instead of C4? Because it really depends. Different companies will go back and forth. Different companies interpret what middle C is, because in the MIDI domain, there's if you're basing middle C based on a piano keyboard of 88 keys, that's one aspect, but you could also realize that MIDI has 128 notes, so there's more notes in, there's more notes within MIDI, so that's why you see the discrepancy. So there is no actual within MIDI, no specified value for what middle C is. So different companies, I think Yamaha and Steinberg do it as C3, some other companies will do it as C4. But again, there's more 128 notes in MIDI and 88 notes for piano. All right, so we have Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. All right, so we have Flavie from Canada. Says he's attending a second stream and loving it. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so we see from Spittoon Dude, are there any restrictions when using expansion packs with Cubase, PC, or Mac? So if it's like specifically dealing with expansion packs for content, where we have all of our different loops, so all of these loops and all the content and samples that you have here could be freely used in your productions without any copyright infringements or copyright restrictions. But let me know if it's another restriction that you're speaking of. All right, so we have Master Lee sending a big hello from Edenbridge in the UK. Thanks for joining us. Always wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we have the Garfy guy ask, when my audio stem imports from another DAW into Cubase, it moves off the grid location that it was on the other DAW. Why is this and how is this fixed? So anytime that you record, so I'm not sure, depending on what your grid is. So if your grid is set to bars and beats, and let's say in the other program it was recorded maybe 2 seconds, it could be a discrepancy of that. If you want the initial value of the recorded file to be in the same exact place, what you could do is select, I'll just show a different file here. So if all the files are not appearing where they initially were recorded, what you could do is select all of the events, and you go to Edit, and then you'll see under Move, and then you'll see Move to Events to Origin, and that will place it at the middle time. But again, depending on, so that's going to be based upon the timestamp of the audio file. But if someone else was recording in bars and beats, and you're in seconds, or they recorded not with the grid in bars and beats, you could run into discrepancies there. All right, so we have Mikfosoflem from Nigeria joining us. Thanks for watching and joining us this evening. All right, so we see, hey Greg, wondering if it's possible to export a music XML out of Cubase retaining the track names. So let me just... I don't think the track names are carried over into Music XML, but we'll give it a shot. Okay, so I will now export Music XML. With the new project. Try one more time with Music XML, see if it's. But I don't think that the track names are maybe included with the Music XML. Doesn't like my XML today. So I don't think that's going to be carried over through Music XML. So and I think we asked that earlier. So, but I'll pass it along as well. I'll check the crash report on that. All right. All right. Wonderful to see Rick Ballantyne on from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thanks for your lovely coffee cup that you sent. All right, so we see Patrick asks, how can I merge two MIDI regions together, an orchestra played in solo patches into a MIDI region for an ensemble patch, for example? So if we have two different MIDI events here, so let's say I'll transpose all of these notes. Okay, and so we see that we're going to have overlapping events here. And if let me just turn off a preference for delete overlaps. So I take this particular file and these are overlapping. So if I wanted to merge these, we would grab the glue tool, and I think you just hold down Alt or Option, and now those two events would be merged together as a single event. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. All right, Patrick asks, is there a project logical editor setting that selects empty tracks? Okay, so let's go ahead and select media type is equal to our container type. We'll say track. Property is set to is empty. So now we're going to select tracks that are empty. And that would be all you'd have to do. So let's do a new project here real quick. So put these on different tracks, and I'll put some empty tracks here. So we can see that the empty tracks are selected. So for your condition, you want to choose select. Container type is equal to track. Property is set to is empty. All right, so we see for Patrick, says, hi Greg, were you able to figure out the applying a select length of fade using a keystroke feature I was looking for? So I didn't come up with anything that was like really clean. I could do it if it was set to like a quarter note or like a half note, like a different musical value. So, but I'll continue to work on it. I'll work on it over the weekend, see if we could show. If you want to ask me on Tuesday, I'll revisit it. All right, so we have a question. What's the difference between a simple marker and a cycle marker? Thanks. Okay, so when we have marker tracks, there's position markers. So we'll go add a marker track. Okay, so when we have a position marker, so a position marker is just takes us exactly to this particular position. Now, if we want it to define a range where we have a not just a start, but a start and an end, this is what a cycle marker allows us to do. So, so a cycle marker has a start and an end, and this could often be used for exporting different files. So if you have different cues within a single project, you could have multiple cycle markers. And so if we come here, we could just add your cycle markers. And so now if we had multiple projects within the same, and we go to our file menu to export, and we do our export audio mix down, we can now choose to export each of the individual cycle markers. So that way we could say, okay, we want everything in, like a cycle marker could be for an entire song if you're doing like a live concert recording. And that way we could export each individual range within the cycle marker independently. So a position marker is just a start, but a cycle marker defines a particular range with a start and end point. All right, so Felix asked, I'd like to know how to create an impulse response. I asked last week, but I'd like to know how to save it into a file so I could use it in Amplitude 5. How can I record that impulse into waves? You see, looks like it got cut off into waves frequency. So, you know, to access an impulse file, I guess what you could do is, one of the things you could do, let's come over here, let's add, I'm going to add a group track. Okay, and on the group track, I'm going to set an insert. And let's get to our reverb. And we'll go to reverence. Okay, I'm going to take my mix down to 0%. So now when I click here, this is our impulse. So I'll turn this up a little bit. So I'm going to take this group. Let's come over here to an audio track. And I'm going to set the group as the input source. Place this into record. And now I have an audio file of the impulse directly there that we could trim out. So that's the impulse response. So if you want to record it there and use that in other plugins, I'm not sure how other plugins would utilize the impulse, but that's how you could generate an audio file for an impulse. All right, Rick Ballantyne asks, Greg, I'm getting to integrating my expressive E into my controller arsenal. Anything special I should know? So I think with 13.03, the latest version, if we come over here, we could click on note expression input device. And then I believe you could, that once you have this set up as your note expression input device, that you could just connect this directly to the expressive E. So I think that was added in 13.03. So just kind of click here and add a note expression input device and then connect the MIDI input port there. Okay, Patrick asks, what is the difference between the time stretching algorithms? Is there an algorithm that allows for independent control over time stretch, pitch shift, and formant shifting? When we see the elastic algorithms, we can see that these are kind of be broken down into kind of optimum settings for, so it's going to be whether you want it to be more rhythmic based, like we could think of this for drums. If you want for pitch, maybe more for vocals and let's say guitars, pianos, and then you have tape, which would mimic a analog tape machine. So as we have these, we could tweak these. So those are kind of the three basic algorithms. Then you have whether you want the formant to be preserved, or if you have an older system, if you need the efficient algorithm. If there are other plugins, so if we come over to this plugin, we could say, let's go to, if we go to our pitch shift plugin and go to pitch correct, and now that we open up this, we could do formant shifting directly here, or if you're inside of Very Audio, just go to a different project where I have some audio, or inside of Very Audio. So, those algorithms aren't really meant to be adjusted so much, but if you need to make adjustments, even within Very Audio, if we come here, we'll say, okay, let's go to Very Audio, and we'll put it on show all smart controls, and you could adjust the formants for each segment in the lower left-hand corner. So as soon as you do that, you can see kind of your formant adjustment there if needed. But for the kind of real-time time stretching, you don't necessarily have control over those different aspects. Okay, Jose Saliva asks, hi Greg, can you demonstrate how to extract a bass line when using spectral layers and convert that bass line to MIDI? Okay, so let's take a look at an example. So I have one that's a song that's kind of unmixed already, so we'll open this up. Okay, so I've kind of done this process on this particular track. All right, so I've broken down like the drums and vocals. So at this point, I could drag this bass line out. I'm going to now go in, so as we do this, it takes the bass line out of this, magically enough. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to render this as a new file. So we'll go to bounce selection. And now we'll come over here to Very Audio. And within Very Audio, we're going to tell it to extract MIDI. So under our choose function, we'll extract MIDI. And we'll go ahead and take a quick listen to it. Let's add an instrument. So I'll play this track, we'll mute the bass. So our bass part here is muted, and this is just a MIDI playing back. So that's how you do it. So once you have the mix, drag it out, drag the bass line out into the project, convert that into its own separate audio file. So we could render that, go into Very Audio of that file, and then choose just to, under function, extract MIDI. And then you could assign that to an instrument and play it back, and you can see how the results turned out great on that. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we have Zen just saying hello to everyone. It's the first of these he's managed to catch live. So we hope to see you on many more. And thanks for joining us today. All right, always wonderful to see Jason Sykes from South Shields, England. All right, so we have Stevie Ray says, hey, Cubase tuned in from Belfast, Northern Ireland, using Cubase 13 Pro. Thanks for joining us today, being online. All right, Patrick asks, I assume it isn't possible to dock any supervision meters to a fixed position in Cubase or change the meters type in the meters section. If I want a correlation meter, I'd have to use a floating window. So yeah, you'd use a floating window, but you could. So let's say if we come over here and we have supervision on, and let's come over here and so let's say if we were, once you have it kind of set in place, you can't save this as a workspace. So we'll make this a project workspace. So now when I come over here, let's say I change different aspects, we come over here to our workspace. And I'll just say, okay, let's go to our project workspace. So once you kind of just save that as a workspace, you can come over here. Let me just get rid of some of these other ones. But like here, I have kind of different meters. So, just save it as a particular workspace. And then you could have it's going to be a floating window. It's not going to be docked, but, you could have it, even on different screens. But, try using a workspace. You could do it globally or for the particular, or as a project workspace. All right, so we see from this is question, if I want to build a 4-bar section that I duplicate to arrange my track, i.e. adding, removing parts throughout as common in EDM, would it be best to use cycle markers or arranger sections? I would say if you're kind of building up, so let's say we do like a new project here. So I would say that if you have multiple parts that are kind of already built, that it probably makes sense I would maybe initially build it using a cycle marker. And I think we had this, I kind of showed this on Tuesday's live stream. So let me have a project kind of set up. Okay. So let's say I have like maybe 2-bar intro and I have this. All right, so say this is our 4-bar part, but it's obviously more. So we have kind of intro and an A and B section, let's say. All right, so if we wanted to do markers, so a lot of times what people may do is just kind of, if we have the preference set up here, get editing to cycle follows range selection, that would now we could just come over here and double click with the range tool, and that would automatically set the markers around the particular range. So if I come here and we could build up a song. So if I wanted to hold down, so let's say if I build a cycle marker here, one of the things that we could do is now if we have a cycle marker between the events, we could also just double click on the cycle marker, and then I could just hold down my Alt or Option key and drag. So I can say, okay, let's come here, let's add a cycle marker, double click between the cycle markers, and I could build my arrangement like this. So if I hold down my Alt or Option key, we could just do it like that. So if you wanted to do it very linearly, that's great. But also if you wanted to now come say, okay, I want to go A twice, and then B, A, C. So if I just have like my particular, once I have those defined, so I could now and we'll tell it to follow the cycle, we'll have it follow the arranger. So now it's not going to play in the linear order. It's going to play A, repeat this section. So once you build up the parts, and if you want to experiment with more exotic arrangements or have multiple arrangements of the same piece, that's when I would utilize the arranger track. So after it does B, it's going to jump to A for one time, and now to C section. So it's really, you know, perhaps probably a personal preference. If you want it to, you know, work, you know, either way would, you know, could make sense. So I think maybe building the initial 4-bar sections, I may do it as a cycle marker that just kind of loops, and then I may, if I wanted to do like, you know, 5 different variations and try those out, that's when I would jump into the arranger track. And then once you have the arranger track all set up, you could choose to flatten the chain, and that will just turn your non-linear arrangement into a linear arrangement. All right, so we see from the Garfy guy, hello Greg, I've imported a MIDI drum file from BandLab. The timing is fine. Initially, however, when I select a different drum type, it moves it off the grid and makes it out of time. How do I stop this? So I'm not sure if it's a particular drum loop, or you said if it's a MIDI drum file. Okay, so let's jump here. I have like a MIDI. Okay, so let's come here. So I got like a MIDI pattern. So make sure that like the track itself is set to musical mode. Usually MIDI will automatically kind of follow, you know, different tempo changes, but make sure that this particular track, like that you see, if you see a little clock here, that you actually just switch it to be like in musical mode where you see kind of a quarter note defined there. So let me know if that's kind of set up. All right, we see Soren on, and we see from Squap, I have a question to ask, but I have to post twice because text doesn't fit. So yeah, feel free to do that. You can spread it across. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so Patrick asks, hi Greg, can I print marker track markers into the wave export of my song? So, you know, there's not really, there's kind of a generic marker. So Cubase isn't going to print the markers into the song file. Wavelab will do that. So there is kind of a generic marker format that's read by a lot of different audio programs, but it's not necessarily part of the actual broadcast wave metadata. So Cubase doesn't print the markers, but let me know if there's a specific reason you need to print the markers into the song. All right, Achilles asks, is it possible to search plugins by developer and not only by the name of the specific plugin? So I think when we come over here, that the search function is going to be for the DLL, but if you want it to go to your studio menu, and let's go to your VST plugin manager, and we see this little drop down menus. Instead of organizing it by category, you can sort by vendor. I think I only have Steinberg plugins on here, but if you choose sort by vendor, then all the plugins will be organized by the company. So it doesn't necessarily search, but that way you could see all the different manufacturer of plugins and go to that. But I don't think you would say search for Waves plugins or search for Universal Audio plugins. All right, wonderful to see Val checking in from Vienna. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see Daniela says, I did not upgrade Cubase Pro for several reasons, so I did not follow the voice improvements and stop dongle server is not promising much. Additional that you stop VST2, important for my Windows 7 based hardware, $135,000 Fairlight. So we're still using VST2 plugins. It's just companies aren't going to be, I don't think that they're offering the, VST3 came out in 2018. So I guess if a plugin was released when VST3 it could be able to drive, at least in the United States. But the VST2 plugins are still available and still work. And we're sorry that you bought that may not be future-proof compatible with your $135,000 Windows 7 based Fairlight. All right, so Benny just says, Greg, it's been a long time since you ran a quiz competition with giveaways. So usually you do it kind of for special occasions. So I think we did it for the holidays. I'll see if we have any. I think we did it for like the 250th, but I'll see if we can come up with a reason for a quiz. But yeah, those are always fun. So I kind of keep notes throughout different live streams of potential quiz questions. So. All right, so we see from, I think it's Squap, without time stretching algorithm, i.e. true vinyl tape style. I know there are different ways to do it. I mean, specifically like the transpose function for easy on-the-go editing. So I'm not sure. So if we have a file here, so let's say, we'll show this. So I'm not sure if you want to do like a vary speed type of function. So I'm going to select all these and I'm going to switch the algorithm here to Elastic Pro Tape. And we're going to turn on our tempo track. Okay, so let's come over here to our tempo track. Okay, so our original tempo here was at 100 beats a minute. So if I wanted this to kind of ramp down, let's say from this point, and I want this to behave kind of like a very speed control. So this way the pitch changes. So as we adjust our tempo, the pitch is changing just like analog tape. Then we could have it speed up. So now it's kind of like we're speeding up the tape machine. And we can go back to our original tempo. Right now. So we could do it kind of like that, but if you wanted to take, you know, even maybe a different approach is just going into like the sampler track. So let's say if I want to take, we'll open up, let's say our sampler control, and we could drag this file in. And now we'll choose our start position, and we see that we could have pitch bend. So I'll set my pitch bend for 1 octave. So we'll say, okay, this is going to be my. So now I'm just triggering this sample, and if I do pitch bend, and then if we want to, we could put that into audio warp, we could put it into spectral. And you could just use your pitch bend wheel to take any sample and do automation of pitch bend. So let me know if any of those would work for what you want to do. See, Peter just says, so sad to hear about Steve Albini. Industry's lost another giant. Yeah, he's far too young. It's sad to read. Met him a couple times. All right, so we see just my question in brief summary for voice. It's maybe to do for 3 to 4 sound patches, our advantages in voice in the most recent Cubase. So if it's probably, maybe it's the vocal chain that you're talking about. So let's say if I want it. So I'm just going to bypass some of my existing processing here.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through.
So now, instead of having like lots of different plugins, we can go to the vocal chain. And from here, we could just.
With you, just like a long, long time ago.
And this would allow us to do like different cuts.
Oh, I remember the day
gates.
that we went.
You can do pitch correction.
Seems like a long, long time ago.
De-essing, compression,
kiss, there was no regret.
and we could choose
right
different
after that Garth Brooks show. You told your daddy and
EQs. If you
my
want to,
mom said you were too damn good for any boy that dumb.
if you want like an exciter,
His soured words are now dead and done. That was a long, long
compressor for character, different
time
EQ
ago.
here, And you could change the order of all these.
Now our 2 grown daughters are married with kids of their own.
So say I just want a warm chamber.
And I know your dad's pretty happy now, 'cause what began as our first kiss,
If I want to add delay,
it started all of this.
So all of these processes, instead of having, tons of different plugins, I could just come over here. We change the track to stereo. We could do all this within one single plugin.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
And listen to that in context.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through.
So it gives you kind of idea of the different vocal processing that you're able to do all within one single plugin. So let me know if that's what you mean, Daniela, by voice. All right. Always great to see Captenergy Music checking in from Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us. And we have Nikolai from Bulgaria. Thanks for being on this evening. Great to see Jay from Secret Studios. And always wonderful to see Pertti Komenen from Finland. All right, so we see, hello everyone, Cubase 13 Pro freezes when I change the sample rate from 48 to 44.1 or vice versa. 12 Pro could do that. Unfortunately, I made a project in 48 kilohertz by mistake. Thanks. All right, so if it could be, if we go to your studio setup, and depending on your audio interface, make sure that, if this is being externally clocked, make sure that that is turned off, and also check your clock source. But wasn't any real changes from 12 to 13, but that could be a setting that could make a difference for you. Always wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, Captenergy Music asks, great to see you today. I hope you and the fam are doing well. So we are. Thank you for asking. So we see any big plans for spring/summer, super booth, or anything like that. So, generally, I'm not involved with super booth because, we have a whole team based in Hamburg. So it's a lot closer for them to take a 90-minute train ride from Hamburg to Berlin. But instead of flying me from Washington to Berlin, so it's more cost effective. And I think most people there are probably speaking German, which I don't speak. So, but we're looking, I think we may have an event in Nashville in the fall. So, but we'll see, budgets are always tight for travel. All right, Secrets Studios asks, hi Greg, I just really comprehended phase rotation RX by direct offline processing. However, I'm wondering if there's a way to do it more easily in a Cubase method. Okay, so if you have two files, so let's say we had it like this guitar, and we'll duplicate the guitar part here. Okay, so let's say this guitar I want panned hard left. And this guitar I want panned hard right. Alright, so if I want to just like flip the phase, so let's say I'll just select my guitar part, and we could And we always think of phase as being kind of, really more about like, the timing. So let's come over here to samples. All right, so I could take this particular guitar, and as we're playing, and I adjust just a start position in samples here, you could hear kind of the phase relationship. So we're just kind of offsetting the two waveforms against each other, and you could do different phase if we want to switch it the other way. So we're close to being in phase now. But as I take these two files, so there I'm like, so if we listen to this, we can hear we're in phase on both of them. Then I could just kind of slightly move the one later in time, and then you could create different kind of phasing effects like this as well. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we have the artist known as Love saying hello to everyone, and thank you for everything, Greg. You're welcome. All right, so we see Spittoon Dude says in score edit, change C clef to bass clef. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's look at our score editor. Okay, so all you have to do is double click on the clef, and then you could change it. So you could do it like that, and if it's going to be perhaps a grand staff, you could also just come over here to polyphonic and choose that you want it to be polyphonic or split staff. And then, but you could just double click on a clef and you have alto, tenor clef, guitar tab as well. So you could just come right over here. And that's how you could change the clef in the score editor. Great to see Braxel checking in from Texas. Okay, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, I'm having a hard time with the arranger outputs of new projects, managing the file folders, orphan audio files. I need a strategy, I guess. Any thoughts, Greg? Okay, so let's take a look at, so if it's going to be where you have an arranger track. All right, so let's give this a shot. So let's say we have an arranger track and we want to manage it a little more effectively, because sometimes when you flatten an arranger chain, it could automatically, so as we flatten the arranger chain, it could automatically create a new project for us. So let's say we have this as our arranger track. So let's say we have this not playing linearly. All right, so let's say I want to take all of my tracks here and I'm going to duplicate my track version, okay? And then let's say if I want to, let's go to our flattened chain section. So our destination, we could do it to a new project or our current project. So I'm going to now do it in the current project. Let's see if we flatten the chain here. Okay, so we have that. Now I want to take all of these particular tracks and go back to my original. So there's the original one, and when we come back here, this is our flattened one. So you could try that, but just when you're, just be aware that when you're working with the arranger track. That you could just, as we go to flatten it, you could do it to a new project or to the existing project. All right. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, how do I ID orphan audio files once my media bays are cleaned in all my projects? Then what? So if you have audio files that have been, what I would do is go to your media menu and just choose to remove unused media. And you can do this within the pool as well. So you could just, in this way, if you have, so again, just click on remove unused media, and then it's not going to be referencing audio files for the project where you say, this file, we can't find this file. You could just choose to remove the unused media from media menu, and then the files that aren't there won't be referenced further. All right, Braxel asks, Greg, when I select a channel in Cubase 13 Pro, it automatically puts it in record mode. Can I stop that? Is there a way I can color channels and groups instead of one at a time? So, all right, so let's take a look at when we select a track so that it's not automatically record enabled. That's going to be a preference. So let's come over here. So we'll go to editing, and I think it's going to be under project and mix console. You'll see enable record on selected audio track. So turn that off right there. And now I turn that off. I select a track. It's not armed for record automatically. But if you want that on, so again, editing, project and mix console, enable record on selected audio track. All right, so second part of the question, is there a way to color channels and groups instead of one at a time? So if I select all of these tracks, if I hold down my shift key correctly, okay, so, and I come over here to my color. So I'm going to select colors, and then we could take the selected tracks, make sure that you don't have events selected. So if I have an event selected and I have all these tracks selected, and I come over here, the event selection will take priority over the track selection. But now if we just choose, we have no event selected, we can colorize multiple tracks simultaneously. All right, so we have from the blue blanket, why when working at 23.98, the project start time is set to 1 hour. The primary timeline, when set to timecode, will show 1 hour, but a secondary timeline, when set to seconds, reads 1 hour and 3.6. All right, so I think we covered this last time. All right, so I'm going to switch my between seconds and bars and beats. Okay, so let's come over here. All right, so let's say we start with 30 frames a second, and I have a 1 hour offset. Okay. All right, and switch this to seconds. Okay. So now we see that those are lined up between timecode and seconds. All right, so we'll switch our frame rate to 2398. All right, so we see that this is going to be, so we have, you know, I think what it is when we see our time code here, that the, you know, when we're setting, and I think this makes sense because when you go to project sub, we're setting, let's set my project start time here to 1 hour. All right, let's make sure I got the time. All right, and let me just, sorry, that's set for 1 minute. All right, so when we see, you know, because I think what we're doing is, and, you know, I sent a message, and there's holidays in Germany this week. But, you know, when we're setting this, it's actual the project start time. You know, we're not setting it by the SMPTE time code. So we're setting the project start time based upon the, you know, on absolute time and not SMPTE time code. So we're not doing a 1 hour of frame rates. We're doing a 1 hour of time. So I think that if we switch to, you know, and obviously there's not an even number of frames per second, which is why I think there's the discrepancy in the frame. So let's say if we come over here, so, but when we come over here, because I think, and I'll discuss this further, that, you know, since we're not doing an offset of, you know, 1 hour in SMPTE, but we're doing a project start time in the duration. So now if we go back to an even frame rate, that those offsets will match because there's an even number of frames per second. So I think, you know, we're setting the offset in absolute time. We're not setting the offset in SMPTE time code. So I think that's the discrepancy that you're running into. All right, so we see DJ Mixes checking in from Switzerland. He's doing a short trip to London. All right, so we see Braxel asks, why when I import tracks, they seem to be on slow mode and not played at the right speed? So that would kind of indicate that maybe it's a sample rate issue, that maybe your project's at 48K and it's you're importing a 44.1 file. So one of the preferences that you could set is if we go to editing, to audio, and you'll see on import audio files here, you'll see convert to project settings, and that way the sample rate will automatically convert to whatever sample rate you're using in the project. So try that. All right, so we have from Ariel, hi there, when adding new tracks to your project, is there an option for setting the default track height? I generally use 3 or 4, and also a default automation height, I generally use 8 or 10. So I think it depends on how many projects. So let's say if we double click and we have, so we added a file here, a track, but let's say if I have a number of audio tracks, and then we go to, let's say, add an instrument track. So I think it will, try to automatically set it to kind of an optimum level. So I think that there is kind of an algorithm for that. But I don't think that it's, but there is kind of a reasoning for like the visibility of the particular settings. And like as we come over here, we could see this, but let's try if I add like 50 tracks to a new project, we'll see if it behaves differently. So it kind of seems let's come over here to the track control settings. I'm not sure if these will give different results, but I think that it is kind of something that's kind of automatically handled in the background. But I mean, it seems pretty comfortable to see the different controls for me. But so I'm not sure if it's adjusted, but I think it could be depending on like the number of tracks that are already in your project. All right, Eric Sampson asks, is there a way to always have the focus quick control top bar opened when whatever plugin I open? So I don't think it's by default, and I think that could be pretty annoying to lose that screen real estate. So if you're not familiar with it, so let's say if we come over here to your VST amp rack, so I think the intention is once you kind of have this open, but let's see if we could do a keyboard shortcut. Yeah, I don't think it's a keyboard shortcut, but I think that people would, by default, have the quick controls are kind of automatically assigned by the 8 particular plugin, the 8 top values of the plugin, and not necessarily, so they're kind of automatically generated. And then when you need to adjust or tweak, you have the option to do that. But I don't think a lot of people would want these options on by default, because once you get them kind of set up once, they're going to be good to go. All right, so we see from Eric Sampson, what is the Razor Compare button doing? All right, let's take a look. Okay, so let's open up Razor. All right, so I think, so let's say if we have this kind of, all right, so I think what this is going to do is, so I think that this may give you the, and I'll have to read the manual just to make sure, but I think what this may do is bypass the gain so that you could hear what it's doing to the file itself. So when kind of hover over, reduce the output level for bypass compare, so you could see what is happening with the content with, I think, without the gain increase. I could be wrong in that. All right, so we see from Eric why the jog and shuttle functions have been removed from the transport bar a long time ago. So I don't think a lot of people were using the jog wheel, and still all the same functions are there. So in the keyboard shortcuts, so if we wanted to come over to the key commands, so let's say we just want to come over here to shuttle play. So let's say I'll just program on my MIDI remote here. All right, so we'll say all right, so let's say as we're playing here, all right, so let's say so, you know, all those functions are still available that you could map MIDI to, or if you just wanted to change, you know, the tempo of your project, let's say as you're playing, you know, you could just come over here, say, okay, and just type in different tempo values. So the functionality is still there. It may not be visible on the transport, but, you know, the functions are still in the program. All right, so we have Home Studio World checking in from Jordan. Thanks for being online today. All right, so we have Sebastian Dior says, does Cubase / Nuendo work better on Apple or Windows? So I think it works great on both, and it's kind of taking advantage of all the, you know, hybrid CPU offerings, both from Intel and Apple. So I think either choice is great. You know, I think if you ask someone has a powerful Windows system, they'll tell you it works. Cubase works great on their system. Or if you have a powerful Apple system, they'll tell you Cubase works great. So I think I run it on both. I run my work computer on my Apple MacBook, and I have an i9, and I think Cubase runs great on either one. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so we have Alex B sending greetings from Ukraine/France. Thanks for being online tonight. See, Heartbreak Time Machine says it always forgets about Workspaces. All right, so we see many thanks, Greg. Can you please show me how to import gig files in Hallion 7 and save it as an instrument in user? Thanks. All right, so I don't have any Giga sampler files. So I think once you come over here to the browser, that you would just direct it to wherever your, wherever your third-party sample libraries are. So wherever your content is, just direct it here, and then I think you could open it directly from the browser right here. So I don't think I have any Giga Sampler content to check, but I think you would just do it directly from the browser itself, and then just save the particular preset. All right, we see Jazz Dude posted a link. Thank you for that. All right, so we see from Scape21. Hi, Greg. I know you can import MIDI files and turn them into groove templates by dragging them into the Quantize panel, but they are specific to BPM. Is there a way to do this to work for any BPM and any projects? I don't think that they are specific for BPM. Let's go ahead and just take a look. Okay. Okay, so I'll just do all right, so I'm just gonna kind of paint in a quick kind of groove here. I'll just mute this. All right, so I'm gonna quantize this with a groove here. So let's say, okay, we're gonna call this bass groove for the part. All right, so we see that we're pretty straight now. I'm just gonna add a heavy swing. Okay, so this is, all right, so our current tempo is at 100 beats per minute. I'm going to close this. Let's go to my Quantize panel. We'll open it up fresh. Drag this over. Okay, so we have this synth bass. I'm going to now come over to a new project. I'm going to set my tempo to 88 beats a minute. All right, so we have different tempo here, different project. And we see that this is our synth bass that's still saved. Okay, so now we have straight eighth notes here. I'm going to select all of these and we'll quantize. So you can see it's not based on tempo. It's just relationship within the measure itself. So it's not tempo based for the groove quantize. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, we have Chilluminate saying hello from California. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Chilluminate, hi Greg, how do I randomize volume or panning of a guitar track? Okay, so I assume it's going to be all right. Let's see if it's a couple of different approaches. So all right, so I think that we could do, and this may be a little convoluted, like if we wanted to utilize an LFO for it. So let's say if we want to all right, so a lot of times, it's pretty easy just to kind of come over here but I'm not sure if you wanted to be constantly moving. If that's the case, we may want to come over here. Let's add a MIDI track. And this MIDI track I want to put, and I think we could do this, let's say an auto LFO. And let's go to our studio setup. We can do this through our generic remote. We're going to say, I want this MIDI track, and we have to set up kind of like a MIDI looper. So I'm going to say the output of this track we're going to send it to the IAC bus. And this is something on Mac, or you can get like loopback on Windows. Okay, so now we could go to like the studio setup. Let's go to generic remote. We're going to say, we'll make sure we have the right controller address. So I'm going to click on let's say as we play. Okay, so this MIDI is being sent out to the generic remote with our LFO. I know this is convoluted. All right, and here we wanted to control, let's say, the mixer. let's say we want it to be our guitar. And let's say I just want to do so we can kind of just take our guitar and kind of randomize. I can say, okay, I want just to do it like every half note. So once again, take a MIDI track, and on this MIDI track, we want to send it out to like an IAC bus or looper. And we're going to put on the Auto LFO plugin. Go directly to your studio setup to a generic remote. Set your loop for in and out. This is going to take that MIDI message that we just captured and learn. And then we can say, okay, we want this to control volume or panning, whatever you want. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish overall. I know it's a little goofy workflow. All right, so we see David M checking in from a hot UK. So we have kind of we had almost a 30-degree temperature drop in the last day here outside Washington, D.C. Okay, so we have a question from, it says, hello, Greg. I tried to separate chords of 4 notes into different tracks using the Project Logical Editor, but it didn't work. I wanted to select the lowest voice. But some notes were selected while others weren't. Is there a way to make the division, for example, for a string quartet? All right, so let's see if I have. Okay, so let's say I have this. All right, and at this point we want to take like the lowest note of the chord. Okay, so let's go to the logical editor. So go to MIDI menu to logical editor. And I think we want to we could do extract to track. I'll say type is equal to note, and we'll choose context variable equals lowest pitch. All right, and I think if we, so now, all right, so let's not do lowest pitch because that's going to be, let's choose position in the chord for the part, and we'll say root note. So now we could have the root notes. We could come over and choose, okay, I want the minor third, or so we'll choose equal to position and chord. So we'll say minor third or major third. So then I could just come over here and extract those particular notes like that. So try using the context variable equal, and then you can choose position and chord. If you have the chord track, you can also use the note number in the chord as well. So if we come over here, I could just say then I could just say, okay, our bass is extracted. Let's come over here, and then we could do the lowest in the chord multiple times, and then have it all separated right there. So you could try that. All right, so we could think, we see Chilluminate says, hi Greg, what's your suggested positioning placement for drum parts in the soundstage? So I think most people tend to work from audience perspective. So let's come over here. And one of the great things, and we get this more with like more acoustic drums. Let's say we have Groove Agent playing here. So let's say, okay, we look at our instrument. Now one of the cool things is, like when we look at this, so we could see the panning is more from audience perspective, but let's say I'm playing this particular part and I want it to switch the perspective. If we come over here to the mixer, and go to the kit mix, that you could actually just come right here and swap the left and right channel. So if you want it from drummer's perspective to audience perspective for like the acoustic kits, you could do it just by clicking on the kit mix itself. But generally, I think most people tend to use audience perspective. So as the audience is looking at the drummer, they kind of have the hi-hats a little more to the right, and as they go their toms from high to low, they go from, you know, right to left from the audience perspective. But there's no real wrong or right answer. All right, so we see from Danielle Tocan, says, if I understand right, the voice, I guess the vocal chain is just set in one plugin. So we could think of it as kind of, like 16 different processes consolidated into one plugin interface. All right, so we see Jimmy checking in from Atlanta. So wonderful to see you on the live stream. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for being on. All right, David M says, hi Greg. Can you go over match EQ? That would save me some time faffing about. Love great English words like that. Okay, so and we can do this with the built-in curve EQ. So the Voxengo curve EQ comes with your Cubase. All right, so I want to import 2 tracks here. All right. Just, okay, I think this one is a different EQ curve. All right, let's. Okay, so I want to take, let's say this track is going to sound a little more mid-rangey. So let's say I want to take this curve and apply it to this one. So we can put this just on the master section. Let's come over to the EQ section and open up curve EQ. So I think we want to set this to average, and we'll see kind of static and match. So I'm going to play back the file, one of the files. So we'll come over here. And once we see kind of the lines settle in, all right, so I'm going to put that as a take. All right, and I'm going to select the other song here. And once we see the lines kind of settle in, so we can see kind of the different frequency ranges here. All right, so I'm going to do a take there. So I want to use this as the reference and apply to this file. So now when we play back this file, and we bypass. All right, and as we do this, let's match the spectrums. So a little brighter. So once again, just go put the mode to average, click on static and match, capture the different parts, and then you want to say you want to have one as the reference and apply it to the other and match the spectrum, like so. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset in UK. All right, so we see the Garfy guy says, hello again. Real-time algorithm has been deactivated because I'm moving a hit point note outside the limit. It had previously been working up until near the end of the stem. How can this be resolved? So let's say so I'm not sure how far. Let's come over here. Let's say if I put this into free warp. So, make sure that, let me know if you're doing kind of like an extreme amount of the time stretching, and also which particular algorithm that you're using. So, first thing I would do is, let's see. The real-time algorithm has been deactivated because I'm moving a hit point node outside the limit. And it could be that maybe if you just, take a portion of the file and render that as a separate file, that may get you around situations like that when it's seeing it as a different file. But, let me know if it's like an extreme amount. All right, so Secret Studios asked, Greg, phase timing shift was super cool. I'll definitely use in the future. However, is there a way to phase, rotate, balance out plus negative waveform peaks to maximize headroom on each? So I would say that if you're kind of, running into situations like that, let's see if we still have the project open here. I would use it in conjunction with maybe the supervision phase scopes. So let's come over here and remove that track. So let's say, okay, so we have our two guitar parts here. And let's get to my inserts here. So let's say we will go to our So as I start working with this, and we'll adjust that as I adjust one of the tracks, you can see the particular frequencies, and you can see the phase relationship visually. So this gives you a pretty easy visual indication. So you can see there we're perfectly in phase, and as I adjust it up, we can see the phasing issues as this goes more horizontal. But we could see it visually, what's going on exactly right there to get a sense. See, there we're just perfectly in phase between those two. So I would utilize the supervision meters, and there's great phase meters that are included with that. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, PK asks, is there an easy way to see all tracks that are coming into a selected group or bus? Okay. Okay, so let's say I have these tracks. I'm going to add a group track to these. Okay, so let's open up, let's say if we're in the group track here, you see at the very top here, we can see 11 sources. So here we could see all the different tracks that are now going into this group. This group is now going to the stereo output. So when you have the group, if you open up the channel settings, just click just to the left of the group, you can see all the sources that are feeding the group right there on the edit channel settings. All right, so we see Daniela asks, does Cubase have a multi-band compressor like OTT? I use this regularly just to remove harsh sounds. It gets files where a microphone is not easy to handle, very decent dialogue for the artist send. So yeah, check out Squasher, I think is very similar. So come over here to Dynamics and go to Squasher. So it's basically an up-down compressor. So I think if you do that, you'll find it very similar. So we know lots of people that stopped using OTT, I think, when Squasher came out. All right, so we see Braxel. I guess you cannot color or move tracks when it's in the mix console window. So let's come over here to our mix console window. So you can't move tracks in the mixer. I know it's a long-standing, just having bad luck with my Cubase. All right. All right, so let me just, I think we could color within the mix console. All right, so for here, we have those selected. So we could just click right there. Let's see if we go to, so let's put on Q-Link here and see if we can. So I think that, you know, when how we colorize in the mixer, that this is going to be done one channel at a time from here. But if you do it from the main project window, you can automatically just have the selected colors. So let's come here. I want these colors, and we could just choose your particular shade that you want. So you can do it with the lower zone mixer. All right. Okay, so Sydney Thurston asks, sorry, how do I take two music files and make them sync to my project? I'm having trouble with music mode, I think. Okay, so let's say our project here is 100 beats a minute. Okay, so if we go to our media, so we want to make sure that we have like the original tempo for the file. So if you're putting in like a drum loop, so let's put in like something highly inappropriate. Okay, let's put a drum beat in. All right, and if I have this set to align beats to project, I could drop this in, and that's automatically going to be placed into musical mode because I turned this on. So now when I drag this across, we now have our funky remix here. And that's going to be kind of like a tempo parasite. So this isn't set to musical mode. It's playing at its original tempo. So that way, you know, so you just need to, and if you need to insert the tempo, all you have to do is you could go to Control or Command plus letter P, and then you could see kind of what the original tempo was here. So let's say our tech house was at 125. These songs are at 100. So you need kind of make sure that you have the original, and then you could also just activate musical mode right here, or select the events and just enable musical mode right here from the info line. All right. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Sydney. All right, and we see just kind of a further clarification. It says when I say music files, I mean MP3 or waves to make a mix in Cubase. Okay, so let's say if it was two track files. Okay, so let's say I want to take two MP3s and kind of line them up for maybe like kind of a DJ type of thing. So I'm going to import my audio files. Okay, and if I want these two to match and have kind of seamless transitions. Okay, so we see that this one is going to be, probably tempos are going to be different on these two files. So this one's faster. This one is slower tempo. So I'm going to select this file and do a tempo detection. And I'm going to select the next file here and do a tempo detection. So again, project menu, tempo detection. Okay, so we can see that we have a significant tempo difference on these two files. So I'm going to select the two files here, and let's go to my audio, to advanced, and we're going to say set definition from tempo. Okay, so as we do this, we're going to say that this is going to be in, I'm going to find just kind of downbeat here. All right, so now that I did that, so let's say this is like 120-ish, this is 170. So let's say I want to put, I'm going to turn off my tempo map, and I want this to play back steady at, let's say 170. So I want the first file to play back. So now we have one steady tempo, even though the two files are kind of radically different. So if I jump here, same tempo. Or if I say I want the tempo to be like one, we'll split the difference, let's say 145. So now both files, even though they have radically different tempos, are playing back at the same tempo. So if you wanted to match up songs that have different tempos, you could just simply work with that. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Sydney. Let me just clear my throat. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Danielle Tocan says, Timecode I never do manual. I use Fairlight standards as most 1 hour, and I jam with Timecode Quartz. Synchronize hardware to come in sync, but never did try with Cubase, so do not know how to set up there. So once you have that set up, all you'd have to do in Cubase is come over here. You could tell it to follow where your audio clock is connected to in your audio interface, and just have it follow to the SMPTE to MIDI timecode, and go over here to transport to your project synchronization setup. So you could just choose your MIDI timecode input source, and then you'll be all set. All right, so we see I have the full apps question. I have the full Absolute 6 package. When I install Cubase 13, do I need to install Hallian Sonic and Groove Agent SE if I have the full versions of both? So you don't need to. Hallian Sonic could be used at different parts of the programs. Like if you do a lot with MIDI files, importing and exporting MIDI files, and you want MIDI playback, Hallian Sonic can automatically be set up as a destination to playback MIDI files. So I would... the actual plugins are pretty small. The content is what takes a lot of the size. I would, you're not going to hurt yourself installing them, but it's not necessary. All right, so Yazian asks, will there be a trial reset software for all Steinberg apps official? So if your trial period has expired, we're not going to allow you to reset your trial version indefinitely. So I don't think so. Okay, so we see Jack C says, what does the vertical white line on the track mean? In my project, some tracks have it and some don't. Okay, so let's say if we add a number of audio tracks. All right, so currently I go to my MIDI remote and I come here. Let's put this on mixer. So when we see this white line indicate it, let me just... All right, I'll just add some more tracks here so it's more obvious. Okay, so if it's this white vertical line, that means that these are the tracks that are being controlled by your control surface. So if you have a control surface, we can now see as we adjust our mix console. So I have 8 faders here. So I'll scroll over in my mix console and we can see my 8 faders are moving. Now, if I select audio track 1, I can now control channels 1 through 8 on my mixer. So this little white vertical line is just indicating which tracks are being controlled by a MIDI remote control surface, and this is the active bank of tracks that are being controlled. So let me know if that's a white line you're talking about, Jaxie. All right, 339 Lenny asks, hello Greg, I duplicated a track with drums from Battery 4 and both of them are linked. So I can't delete the content without changing the other original content. How to fix that? Thank you in advance. Okay, so Okay, so let's say I have content here. Okay, so let's say you say, okay, duplicated drums, so let's duplicate tracks. Okay. So it looks like you should be able to, so I'm not sure if you duplicated. So let's say if I come here and delete, not sure. So I'm not sure if you duplicated the tracks from here, but it could be that maybe they're linked together. So let's see if, all right, so I'm just gonna come to this one here. So we see that I deleted the contents and these two are different. Check to see if you have like this little icon in the upper right hand corner, and this could indicate that these are grouped together. And then if you see this little icon, you might just want to hit Control or Command U to ungroup. So you could group with Control or Command plus G and ungroup Control or Command plus U. So see if it's grouped, but I duplicated the track and was able to just erase. But let me know how you're duplicating the track if you are just coming over here and duplicating the particular track as well from the right click. All right, Memento wants people to whack the like button, and he's letting us know that the World Ice Hockey Championships has started in the Czech Republic. All right, so we see from Lonely Warriors directed to Jazz Dude, you actually have a clue when Cubase 14 will come out. So, generally Steinberg doesn't do kind of teasers 6 months in advance. We'll just kind of drop it when it's ready. So, so nothing has officially been announced, but Cubase 13's only been out for about 7 months. All right, we see Soundscape Studio / recording label saying hello. All right, so we see from Yazian says I can't delete my license in the activation manager. So, from the screenshots you showed me, I don't think that those, are in the activation manager. It seemed like all, excuse me. It seemed like all of the programs you sent were in the e-licenser, so maybe you have to delete it in the e-licenser because they were all versions from before the activation, the Steinberg licensing. Memento is disappointed that we don't have our Friday ice cream yet. And it's wondering where Michael Teams is. I was just wondering the same thing. Great to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, Peter asks, when creating multiple MIDI channels, inspector window, select multi-out instrument, then defaults to out 1 and 2, how to assign selected MIDI channels to another output bus in one fell swoop. Okay, so let's try just a new project here. add a multi-timbral. All right, and let's say I have okay, so we have all of our outputs here. Okay. All right, so let's see if we come here. So I think these might have to be assigned individually, but let me just. Yeah, so I don't think, let me just. Yeah, I think they still have to be assigned individually. I'll try just another keyboard shortcut modifier. So I think they have to be assigned manually still. All right, Illuminate asks, hi Greg, please show us how to create a custom MIDI pattern / arpeggio to be used with the chord pads. Okay. Okay, so I'll just come over here. Do I have it in external sync? Hang on. Okay, so let's come over here to chord pads. And then I think we just drag it. And now, like as we would play, here, let me just clean that up timing wise. So drag this. So just take any event from the project window and just drag it right here into the pattern, and then that's all you'd have to do. All right, so Nacho in the box asks, hi Greg, is there a way to load specific VST user presets with the MIDI remote so I can change keyboard sounds quickly? So it could depend, so usually the MIDI remote's not going to allow you to load a specific sound. Excuse me, I'm clear my throat. It's not going to allow you to load a specific preset or track preset. You could kind of open up the window to do it. But a lot of plugins, like as we, if we wanted to navigate between, different pitches, like as we come over here, you could, so say, okay, I want this particular patch. Let me just turn off the, and then as we, just come over here, you could just, and so depending on how the plugin itself does it, you could use the up and down keys on a lot of plugins to navigate between different presets, but there isn't a mechanism to load a specific preset with the MIDI remote that I know of. Wonderful to see Grant Nicholas from Baltimore. Glad you could make it today. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see from Paul Claridge, Greg, can you explain the control panel? It's showing bass with a slider and guitar with a slider. I've never seen this before. So I'm not sure. I know this was probably 30, 40 minutes ago. So I'm not sure where I was. Showing bass with a slider and guitar with a slider. Never seen this before. Maybe, Paul, if you could let me know just like what part of the program I was in. Sorry, I'm so far behind. I'm trying to catch up. All right, we see Daniela Tocan has to take off. All right, so we see from Yazians, is it possible to delete my trial license forever and again, but I can't open the trial anymore. So, the intention of the trial is that you could run the version for 60 days. The intention is not that when your trial expires that you get another trial version and you just keep doing the trial version. So after 60 days, you would need to, purchase. You can't do another 60-day trial after the trial. So once it's expired, it's expired. So you can't necessarily run a trial version forever. It's not the intention of the trial version. All right, great to see Jazzy Lamel on. Let me see from Yazians, I can't try the trial anymore. Possible to make the trial days longer for Cubase? So no, it's 60 days. That's what it is. So. All right, Jazzy Lamel asks, hey Greg, is there a way to duplicate an audio track via a shortcut? All right, so let me just drop an audio file in. Okay, so let's say I want to duplicate this with a shortcut. So let's come over here to our key commands, and I'll just search for duplicate track. So under project duplicates tracks, you could then assign a keyboard shortcut. So I'll assign it to my MIDI remote just to show you. Okay, so let's say I have this track selected, and then I could just duplicate the tracks command right from there. So again, just go to your key commands, and then you could just search for duplicate tracks under the project category. All right, so we see from Ace Amadeus, great to see you on. And then my chat field jumped on me. Okay, Ace's question is, hope you're well, Cubase 13 or Hallian 7. Do you know if we have any electric guitars that have articulations like palm mutes, chugga chugga slide effects to simulate real electric guitar playing? So let's see if we can find something. All right, so a lot of the ones with the articulations. All right, so let's say we want to do distortion guitar. You may see with the extension of VX. All right, let me just try. All right, let me set my controller here. So here, like if I go to clean guitar VX, and you can obviously run this through distortion. I could have palm mutes. So you have different articulations here. Harmonics, palms, kind of bright attack. So you can play around, but check out some of the ones like that have VX extensions, and those would often include different articulations. All right, question. Is there a way to make MIDI blocks a shared copy after already arranging it? So not that I know of. I think it's going to, I know what a lot of people end up doing. So if you're not familiar with this, if we have this MIDI data here and we want to make a change on this one and have it applied to all the other parts, we could do that. And I think by time you copy that again, that you might just be able to come here, hold down the shift, and now it's when we see this as a shared icon. So I don't know a way to make it shared after the fact, but if I come and we look at this, that now when I make changes on one, that it's going to be applied to all of the other parts, but I don't know of a way to take an existing copy and migrate it to a shared copy. But I'll pass it along as a feature request again. All right, Alex B asks, thanks a lot for your job. Is there a way is there any way for the content in the project window to be moved with the arranger track events? For instance, can I move, cut, copy, paste a whole part of the song using the arranger track? Okay, so what you could do is kind of, the arranger track wasn't intended for copying. But what you can do, and I think I showed it last time, is, you know, if we utilize it with the, you know, so once I come here, you know, we could, I think I made a macro for this. Just go to my key commands. All right, so what I did is I just select arranger event to create cycle markers. So I did transport. So what I did is I just select the arranger track here. We say transport locators to selection, marker, add cycle marker to active track, and then we could do a global copy. So I could run this macro, and now I could just come right over here and paste just like that if I wanted to. Once we have a cycle marker, you could just double click on this cycle marker and hold down the Alt key. So even if I come here, we double click on this, we could run the macro. I could now double click in the cycle marker. So, you know, the arranger track wasn't meant for editing. It was meant for kind of to represent that space and time. But when we use it in conjunction with a cycle marker, that we could just double click, you know, in. So I'll just come here, hold down my Alt or Option key, and I could just double click within the cycle marker and automatically select that entire range if needed. So while you're not doing it from the arranger track, you can create a cycle marker that matches that using this macro, and then you could just globally move everything over using the cycle marker as opposed to the arranger track. So let me know if that's helpful. And I'll show you the macro one more time. And I just added the capability of copying everything within the macro within that particular range as well. So you don't necessarily need to have global copy enabled, but if you wanted to do that, so you can move the cursor and paste. All right, so we see from Yazian, dear Greg, could you show us how to convert audio to MIDI? Okay, so if we have kind of an, you know, a bass part, so let's say we listen to this. You know, or something that's going to be monophonic audio is kind of what this is intended to do. So it's not going to convert, you know, piano chords, guitar chords, stuff like that. So, but if I wanted to take this, I would go into Very Audio. We could edit the Very Audio, and we showed this earlier with kind of extracting the bass. And now we'll choose to extract MIDI. We could put it right there, and then we can see the MIDI data. So within Very Audio, just come over. And under functions, just extract MIDI. So we see, hi Greg, is it possible to extract a guitar pattern from an audio file and save it as a template pattern in the chord pad for later use? So it's not going to do conversion of, you know, if it's just one particular guitar, a single note at a time, we could do that. But if it's going to be multiple notes playing at the same time, we can convert just a single voice from audio to MIDI, but not multiple voices. So if it's just like this bass part, I could take that and drop it in and convert it to MIDI and drop that into the patterns. But most guitar parts are probably going to be more than one voice. All right, so we see Tim K just says I can control all my faders from the Cubase IC Pro app. A lot of things actually, but that white line doesn't show. There's a remote control active. So usually if you see kind of the, like this white line here, that's indicating which particular tracks are being controlled, maybe from your IC Pro or that are kind of being remotely controlled, and that's kind of the active bank. All right, so we see Old Gamer. Can you show how to do reverb in Cubase properly? All right, so the most common way of doing a reverb is going to be just to use an effect send, because often you want the same reverb to be shared across different tracks, so that it sounds a bit more cohesive in the mix. So let's say I want to take,
you wished it all away, and I'm left.
So I just came here and I added a reverence reverb. So here I have just a plate reverb, and so if I want it to take my vocal, I could go to the sends, and we can just right click, and at this point we could, go to the sends here. And we're going to add an effects channel to send one, let's say. So I want it to be reverence. And this is a convolution reverb, meaning it's taking actual samples. And let's say maybe I'll just take this. And what we can do is use this as a blend knob, so we could incorporate more of the reverb. So as this goes to the right, more reverb is blended in. And the amount that we want to use is kind of based on context. So that's how you could dial in and have different reverbs going on. So let me know if that makes sense, Old Gamer. All right. All right. All right, so we see from 339 Lenny says, thanks for the tip regarding grouping. I still have the problem. There's no symbol. I just duplicate track. And if I select the content from the original track, the other is auto-selected. I just right-clicked And duplicate track, both of them are selected. The other tracks in the project don't have the same problem. So, you know, one other thing to check is if they're in a folder. So let's say I come over here, I duplicate this track. Let's say I have this track in a folder. All right, so I'm just going to move this to a folder. Okay. And I duplicated the track within the folder, and I have group editing on or phase coherent audio warp. That's probably not going to work with MIDI, but now if I come over here, these two events are tied. So if they're in a folder, make sure that you don't have group editing on that folder. So if you're duplicating within a folder where group editing is active, that could also cause what you're describing as well. All right, great to see Rude Screen on. Just says Greg from South UK is late to the party and late to Cubase 13. He got the upgrade recently. He's been missing out. All right, Uno Momento was just asking we get 100 likes. Alex B just says thank you very much for the answer, Greg. John Costigan just says, yes, it's a great time to show your appreciation. Hit the like button and helps keep the stream on. Thanks. All right, so I think I'm caught up. I know we had a bunch of questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We do these on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. All right, let me open up my project for today. You know, Memento says, how can I go to sleep without ice cream? Yes, we're all missing Michael Teens today. Okay, so let me open up my Word document here. All right, so our first question is, can you explain what iterative quantizing does? Okay, so let's take a look. All right, so let's look at my performance here. All right, so we'll just solo this track and let's look at a performance. So not hateful timing wise, but if we look at it, we can see that some of the notes will come in early on the beat, some may be late on the beat. So let me just make this a little. All right, so when we want to do quantizing, so we'll go to our quantize panel. What iterative quantizing is going to allow us to do is to have it, and we can see what this, when we go to IQ mode here. So what iterative allows us to do is to quantize based on percentages. So if I came over here and we chose eighth notes, so I want to choose basically the smallest rhythmic value. I may not want it to be so machine-like perfect. So let's say in a typical quantize without iterative turned on, when I would select all notes and hit Q, that would move it directly, all the notes right perfectly on the beat. But it may not be the perfect choice for what we want to do. We may want it to be a little more human. So when we go to an iterative quantize, we can see that we have 80%. So what this is going to do, instead of moving it directly, all the notes directly to the beat, what we're going to be able to do is move this 80% closer to the beat, and then 80% closer to the beat, 80%. So it's going to basically divide the distance by this percentage. So now when we have our iterative quantize, we can see that it's not moving directly to the beat. We do another round of iterative quantizing, etc. So as we keep zooming in, it just keeps moving the notes, not exactly on the beat, but like 80% closer to the beat. So it's a percentage-based quantization. All right, so I had a question mailed in. Please, can you tell me why the first 3 audio tracks in my pool are standard solo versus the other tracks I overdubbed are in Elastic Pro time? I did not mean to do anything different than I usually do. Okay, so what we could do, if we notice this in a particular file, it could be that the file we're working with has gone through very audio. So let's say I'm just going to drag a couple files out here, and we'll do just a quick very audio editing on it. So let's look at our, let's just look at our pool window. Close out the media bay. Sorry about that. All right. So right now we drag the files in. We see everything. Now that we've opened stuff in the, now that it's going into very audio, and we do its analysis here, then the tracks that are in very audio, when we look at it in the pool, again, Control Command plus P, we can see that the very audio algorithm, once you use that on a track, that will switch it to standard solo, and that's the algorithm that does the pitch detection, and the pitch correction is based on that particular algorithm. So if you see some audio files that are in standard solo for the algorithm, that's indicative that you probably have done very audio editing on the particular files. All right, so we had a question. All right. Hi, Greg. Is there a way I can create melodic development devices such as retrograde inversion, melodic augmentation, diminution, etc., using the logical editor, or is there any shortcut already in Cubase 13? So let's say if we have a melody here, so I don't think that there's going to be melodic augmentation or diminution, but we can do some stuff. So let's say if we want to just kind of take this melody, if we go to our MIDI menu to functions, there's some, where we could just come over here. We could choose to mirror. We could also choose to reverse under MIDI functions. And I think if we want to do like a retrograde inversion, I think I made a logical editor preset for this. So let's come over here. Okay, inverted retrograde. So What we could do here is we're going to say we're going to transform, type is equal to notes, and we want to do the pitch. And let's say I want to use like D sharp 3 as the center point for this. So I'm going to come over here. We set that to D sharp 3. So now when I execute this, you see our melodic figure here that we could just do kind of inverted retrograde just like that. So check out some of the mirror options that you could use here, and then you could set your kind of the pitch for the dividing point that you want it to be working from. All right, so we see question in the logical editor as well. Hi, Greg. In logical editor, what does 2/D minus 2 mean? I assume that D minus 2 references a pitch. All right, so let's say if we were going to, I think we could see this. I want to do a select, type is equal to note, and we'll say event, last event, or we'll say every other event, and we'll say event counter. So sometimes when we're dealing with MIDI, there's going to be 128 values that work in MIDI because it's binary. So that's why we have 128 velocity levels, 128 different MIDI notes. So when we're dealing with the project logical editor, when we're going from 0 to 128, if I type in 2 as my value, like I want to select every other note, it's going to show us the number 2, and this would also indicate that this is the second MIDI note. So it's, I would say that depending upon the context that you're using the setting for, it's either going to use the numeric value or the pitch value. So in this case, where we want to select every other note, it's going to use the 2 as opposed to D minus 2, but it's basically just showing different representations of 0 through 128 without having to duplicate functionality. So it's, think of it in context. So if we say, okay, I want to select every other D minus 2 note, we could do that. Or when we're going to select every other event, my second parameter, I want to select every other second event, that we would just rely on the first value for that adjustment, for that value. All right, so we see a question from Chris Hallam. I was wondering if you know whether Steinberg made any accessibility improvements with Cubase Pro 13. I was doing some reading recently and came across this research article from 2020 that evaluated different programs, and Cubase seemed to score the lowest of the 3 dots in terms of users' ability to navigate the software with only a screen reader. It seems like this has been an ongoing issue with Cubase, also Dorco, not sure what other products. This is all based on some searching. Says, do you know if there's any kind of roadmap to improve the user experience for those who need assistive technologies? I know you like to tell the story of Stevie Wonder being the fastest user of Cubase you ever seen, but I'm sure he probably gets help getting installed and creating keyboard shortcuts, macros, etc. A truly new user who is blind would likely not be able to set it up on their own, correct? I don't personally need a screen reader to use Cubase, but I'd feel a lot better using it if I knew Steinberg was making a real effort behind the scenes to make this right. And this is just not something they should do because it's the right thing to do. It's also be quite lucrative endeavor as well. At any rate, I look forward to catching up soon in a live stream. I appreciate all you do for the community. So realize that accessibility for users, I worked with a number of different blind users. Stevie Wonder, as I've mentioned before, Greg Lukens, who's a mastering engineer, audio engineer, who's won numerous Grammys for his work. But realize that accessibility isn't just limited to screen readers. I think that's a small part of the experience for a blind user, being able to set up keyboard shortcuts, being able to, have different windows open but not take over control, to be able to customize so many functions of the software. And, initially, we did a lot of work with Stevie to make him comfortable in his Cubase environment, and we figured, and that's why, Cubase was the first program that offered user assignable keyboard shortcuts, why we do macros, why we could do search for different functions. So some of those things may not translate in a screen reader type of scenario, but that's again a small portion of using the software from a blind user's perspective is not all about screen readers. So there's lots of stuff that's going on in Cubase. I don't think that there is any significant changes in 13 for accessibility, but it's something that they're always aware of that's going on, and improvements. And when we can't do something from a non-visual perspective, those customers let us know. And that's why, again, so much customization is done in Cubase with macros, MIDI remote control scripts, so that people can work very smartly and intelligently without having to rely on visual aspects or screen reader. All right, so we have I have a question for the Hangout. I bought a tiny $15 A to D converter with 2 RCA impedance inputs and an optical output to patch to the optical in on my Apollo Twin. When I add a track in Cubase 12, the dialog defaults to creating a stereo track. I tried to create a mono track for a mono source. Question: should I be able to record one channel of SPDIF input, or should I instead select an ADAT input channel on the Apollo? Also, what are the bit size / sample rate limits? So it really could depend upon what the converter is doing. So if your converter is only doing 44.1K and you have your project at 96K, the converter is not going to jump up to 96K. So it could really depend upon what the converter is inputting. But you should be able to, when you have a stereo input, that, when you go to add a bus, we could take my stereo input here on my interface, but if we add a bus, I could add 2 mono inputs. And now we could say, okay, I want this for input 1. I want to take the same inputs that I have for my stereo and have those for my mono. And when I go to add an audio track, we could choose, okay, I want this to be mono, and which input do I want it coming from? And then you should see your digital input. So more than likely, if you got a $15 A to D converter, it's probably just a stereo converter. So you wouldn't use the ADAT. That's going to be using like an 8-channel system. And it does say, okay, I want to connect to a bus. We could say our mono in, and then you should be able to have an additional input, but you should be able to split those stereo inputs into 2 separate mono inputs on your device. All right. Next question that was mailed in. Don't know why my delete key does that. Must have remapped it to something. Anyway. Okay, next question. I have an audio track recorded without metronome, and I want to assign it to the grid based on chord changes. But only tempo detection option I have is a set definition from tempo. I want to be able to set definition from the chord track. You can see in the attached image that the tempo detection and chord track are not aligned. Is there a way to align it so every chord change will be on the beat? So what I would do, you know, if you run into situations like that, I would do a tempo detection of the file. So I'm not sure if you have to line it up to the chord track for a specific reason, but the chord track's probably not going to be, you know, I would take a different approach personally. So what I would do is come over, let's go to my project menu, and let's do a tempo detection. Analyze. Okay, so all right, so let's come over here, and I'm just going to do, okay, we'll put this in 4/4. So now we have the grid that's defined from the event. So you know, I would say that the chord tracks on the grid are pretty arbitrary, because what I would do now is just come over here, select the event, go to your project menu to chord track, and say we want to say create chord events. And now we've done an analysis of the audio file, and the chord events are now going to be based on the musical grid, because they've been extracted from the audio file itself. So I think that's a much better approach to moving all, you know, instead of moving all of the audio to match the chords, just extract the chords directly from the audio event. If it's not there, or once you've done the tempo, then just simply move the chords, because you know its position could be a bit arbitrary, and you're not going to necessarily, I think, you know, move the audio performance to match the chords. So I think that the chord should match the audio performance. All right, let me jump back to live questions. All right, so we see Tim K says, I always learned something useful here. I have a long way to go yet, but Club Cubase is where we learn to slalom the learning curve. Thanks, Greg. You're welcome. Glad to always help. John Koskin likes your skiing metaphor. All right, so we see from Swef, is there any chance to have a similar stream for VST Live? Is there already one? Do tell. So I think that they have done, I'm not sure if they've done live streams for VST Live. You know, obviously I think Cubase is the vast majority of our business, but if you have like specific questions on VST Live, please feel free to ask. I'm just going to be getting up to speed on version 2 over the weekend, but you know, please feel free to ask questions and I'll be happy to show. We've shown a lot of VST Live stuff here. All right, so we see Ace Amadeus says, Greg, thanks a ton for precise explanations, learning a lot from you, and Cubasers here. See, Uno Memento says, I can say that I'm already a dad here since 1989, but strangely enough, you always learn something new here. A day when you didn't learn anything new was wasted. All right, Gerald Ely asks, with chord pads activated, I used to be able to play single notes outside of the pad's remote range. Since the 13.03 update, I no longer can on Mac OS Sonoma. All right, let's take a look. do new project. I'll just jump to existing one here. All right, so let me go to my chord pads. So mine is working. So as I play up here, and now when I play in the chord pad range, so let me know if I did anything differently than you, but also check to make sure that you have all MIDI inputs active. So let's see if I just connect this to the chord pads as my MIDI input, if that makes... But it seems to work for me. Let me know if I did anything differently than you did. All right, let's see if there's any more questions that come in. All right, great to see Michael Pierce on. It says he's just trying Cubase 13 for the first time this evening. That's great. Good to see you on, Michael. Let me say, I think I may have had a question or two that came in by email. Let me just take a look. All right, hang on. All right. All right, so let's see. I think we already answered the question about not being able to delete a trial license. All right, let me just look. Okay, so I see Michael Pierce sent an email, but he got it fixed. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. All right, we see Gerald Ely just says on the chord pad question is a glitch. He just had to reload a project for it to work. I'm glad it was a simple solution. All right, we'll give it a couple more minutes and see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. All right, so we see one question is from Michael Pierce. Having played with new vocal channel, is there any plan to add the vintage compressor into the compression section? That style is always in my Vox chain. I'll take a look. We'll just look in all the different compressor types. I wonder if it could be more of the extreme algorithm. So yeah, so I'll pass that along as a feature request, but I'm not sure if you played with the extreme algorithm. But we're glad that you're finally up and running in Cubase 13. All right, so we see from just really nice, kind comments says, I want to thank you for these streams. I just discovered them and they are worth gold. So thank you for the kind words. See, Michael Pierce has left his iLock at work and he's having a play with native plugins. That's how it starts. All right, we'll just give it our minute and see if any other questions sneak in. I want to thank everyone for taking part of your Friday morning, evening, afternoon, learning more about Steinberg products today. I appreciate that everyone is just part of such a wonderful community. Looks like Michael Pierce says it'll be back to rain next week in the UK. Enjoy the weather. So we're having kind of rain 4 days in a row here. Should be nice, maybe Sunday for Mother's Day. Okay, so it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank again everyone for all the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick, and if you have, make sure you hit the like button. You could leave nice comments as well. It's always great to see. Allows me to share those with in my reports and stuff like that to my superiors. And we want everyone to stay safe and healthy. We have so, and we see, and if everyone is celebrating, I'm not sure if it's Mother's Day universally, but we want to give a special thanks to all the great mothers out there. Appreciate them. And we see Tiago on from Brazil. Good to see you. But with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. If you're celebrating Mother's Day, have a wonderful day on Sunday. And we'll see everyone back on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up, and we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Take care.